Michael Jackson stopped, right there in the middle of the stage, in front of 70,000 screaming fans. He cut the music. The band fell silent. And then he did something that made his entire security team panic. He jumped off the stage and walked straight into the crowd. But where was he going? And why? It was September 14th, 1991, at the Bucharest National Stadium in Romania. This wasn't just any concert. This was the first time a Western pop star had performed in Romania since the fall of communism 2 years earlier. The entire country had been waiting for this moment. 70,000 people had packed into the stadium, and millions more were watching on television across Eastern Europe. For Romanians, this wasn't just entertainment. This was freedom. This was hope. This was proof that their country was finally part of the world again. Michael Jackson had opened with Jam, followed by Wanna Be Startin' Something, and the crowd was absolutely electric. The energy was different from any other concert Michael had ever performed. These people weren't just fans. They were people who had lived under oppression, who had been denied access to Western culture, who had risked punishment just for listening to Michael's music on bootleg cassette tapes smuggled across borders. The stadium lights created dramatic shadows across thousands of faces, all focused on one man. But Michael's attention had been captured by something else entirely. Someone else entirely. In the VIP section, just 30 feet from the stage, sat a young woman. She was crying. Not the tears of joy that Michael was used to seeing in his audiences, but something else. Something that made his chest tighten, even from that distance. In her arms, wrapped in a thin blanket despite the warm September evening, was a tiny baby. The woman's name was Elena Dumitrescu. She was 24 years old, and she had never been to a concert before in her life. Under Ceausescu's regime, such things were impossible for ordinary citizens. Even now, 2 years after the revolution, she could barely believe she was here. But Elena wasn't here to celebrate. She was here because this might be the last beautiful thing she would ever experience with her daughter. Michael was halfway through Human Nature when it happened. The moment that would change everything. As he sang, his eyes kept returning to that young woman in the VIP section. The way she held that baby. The way her shoulders shook with grief. Even with thousands of people screaming around her, Michael could see it. This was a mother in agony. Without warning, without planning, Michael stopped singing mid-verse. The band, confused, began to slow down but kept playing. Michael walked to the edge of the stage and pointed directly at Elena. His security team immediately moved toward her, but Michael shook his head. That wasn't fast enough. That wasn't right. And then Michael Jackson did something that had never happened before in his concert career. He jumped off the stage. The moment Michael's feet hit the ground beyond the barriers, his security team went into full panic mode. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't safe. Michael was surrounded by 70,000 people with no protective barrier between him and the crowd. His head of security, Bill Bray, immediately started pushing through the crowd to reach Michael, shouting into his radio for backup. But Michael was already moving with absolute purpose toward Elena, and nothing was going to stop him. The crowd realized what was happening. People were screaming, reaching out to touch Michael, but something about the intensity in his eyes made them step back. Thousands of hands reached for him, desperate for contact with their idol, but Michael's gaze was locked on one target. One woman, one baby. As Michael pushed through the crowd, Elena's sister Ioana whispered urgently in her ear. Ioana worked as a translator at the Romanian television station broadcasting the concert. She had given Elena these tickets, hoping for one night of peace. One night where Elena wasn't thinking about hospitals and death. But that night had arrived sooner than anyone expected. Elena's husband, Adrian, had died 8 months earlier, shot by secret police during the revolution. Elena was alone now, with no one but her sister and a baby who was slowly dying in her arms. Michael reached Elena, and the noise of the crowd seemed to fade into background static. He looked directly into her eyes, and what he saw there stopped him cold. This was grief. Pure, devastating, hopeless grief. "Ma'am," Michael said gently, his voice barely audible over the chaos around them. "Why are you crying? What's wrong?" Elena couldn't speak. She just looked down at Sofia, her 6-month-old daughter, then back at Michael. Her face told a story that words couldn't express. Michael looked down at the baby in Elena's arms. Even in the dim light, even through the chaos, he could see it. Sofia's skin had a slight blue tint. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. She had that fragile look of a child who wasn't thriving. Michael had visited enough children's hospitals, had held enough sick children, to recognize the signs immediately. "Your baby is sick," Michael said softly. It wasn't a question. Elena nodded, unable to speak through her tears. 6 weeks earlier, Elena had received the diagnosis that no parent should ever hear. Sofia had a severe congenital heart defect. Romanian doctors said it was inoperable. The medical infrastructure in Romania, devastated by decades of communist neglect, simply didn't have the technology or expertise to perform the complex surgery Sofia needed to survive. The doctors had given Sofia 3 months to live, maybe less. By now, Bill Bray had reached Michael and was urgently trying to get him back to the stage. The band had stopped playing completely. The stadium had fallen into confused chaos. 70,000 people were watching something unprecedented unfold before their eyes. Millions more were witnessing it on television across Europe. But Michael held up his hand to his security team, making it absolutely clear he wasn't moving until he understood what was happening. Michael gently touched Sofia's tiny hand. "What's her name?" "Sofia." Elena managed to whisper. "Sofia," Michael repeated, looking down at the baby with infinite gentleness. "She's beautiful. What's wrong with her?" Elena's sister Ioana stepped forward, translating as Elena's story poured out in broken English mixed with desperate Romanian. The heart defect, the inoperable condition, the 3 months Sofia had left to live, the loss of her husband, the absolute hopelessness of her situation. Everything came out in a flood of words and tears. Michael listened to every single word, his face growing more serious with each sentence. The crowd around them had fallen into an eerie silence, sensing that something profound was happening even if they couldn't hear the conversation. When Elena finished, Michael was quiet for a long moment. The silence stretched out, heavy with anticipation. 70,000 people held their breath. Then Michael looked directly into Elena's eyes and said something that nobody expected. Something that would change everything. "I'm going to help you," Michael said firmly, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "Sofia is not going to die. I promise you that." The stadium erupted. Nobody knew exactly what Michael had said, but they knew something powerful had just happened. They could see it in Elena's face, in the way her knees nearly buckled, in the way she clutched Sofia tighter to her chest. But Michael wasn't finished. He turned to Bill Bray and gave him specific, urgent instructions that nobody in the crowd could hear. Then Michael did something even more extraordinary. He took Sofia from Elena's arms. Michael held the fragile baby against his chest with practiced care, supporting her head and body exactly right. He had held many sick children during hospital visits. He knew exactly how to keep them safe and comfortable. Still holding Sofia, Michael walked back through the crowd toward the stage. Elena followed behind him, surrounded by security, her mind unable to process what was happening. The crowd parted for them like a reverent corridor, and the silence was absolute. This wasn't a concert anymore. This was something else entirely. Michael Jackson climbed back onto the Bucharest stage, carrying Sofia in his arms, with Elena standing beside him. 70,000 people in the stadium and millions watching on television saw Michael holding this tiny, fragile baby, and a hush fell over the entire arena that felt almost sacred. Thousands of people, one single moment, complete silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael announced, his voice thick with emotion. "This is Sofia." The name echoed through the stadium. "Sofia, Sofia, Sofia. She is 6 months old, and she is fighting for her life. Sofia has a heart condition, and her doctors say she can't be saved." Elena felt her legs weaken. Hearing it spoken out loud to 70,000 people made it more real, more final, more devastating. "But I don't believe that," Michael continued, his voice growing stronger. "I believe that where there's life, there's hope. And I believe that when we come together, When we refuse to accept that a child's life doesn't matter, we can change the world. The stadium erupted in applause, but Michael held up his hand for quiet. The crowd obeyed instantly, desperate to hear what would come next. I'm going to do everything in my power to help Sofia get the medical treatment she needs, Michael said. But right now, right here in this moment, I want all of us to do something together. Every single person in this stadium and everyone watching at home. I want us to send Sofia our love, our hope, and our belief that she will survive. What happened next would become one of the most iconic moments in concert history. Michael began singing Heal the World, but slowly, tenderly, like a lullaby, while holding Sofia against his chest. As he sang, Elena stood beside him, her hand resting gently on her daughter's back, tears streaming down her face in rivers. But then the magic happened. As Michael sang, 70,000 people in the stadium began singing along. Not screaming, not shouting, but singing quietly, reverently, gently. 70,000 voices joined together in a collective prayer for one tiny baby. The sound was overwhelming. It was the most beautiful, most powerful thing anyone had ever heard. It wasn't a concert anymore. It was a ceremony. It was hope made audible. It was humanity at its absolute best. Michael finished the song and kissed Sofia gently on the forehead. The baby's eyes fluttered open for just a moment, and she looked up at Michael with what seemed like recognition. Then he carefully, so carefully, returned Sofia to Elena's arms. I'll see you again very soon, Michael whispered to Elena, loud enough for only her to hear. Sofia is going to be okay. I promise you. Those words, I promise you. They hung in the air like a sacred vow. The crowd didn't want the moment to end, but they knew it had to. As Elena was escorted backstage with Sofia, the stadium erupted in applause that lasted for 5 full minutes. Michael stood on that stage, watching Elena disappear into the wings, and everyone who saw his face that night said the same thing. Michael Jackson looked like a man on a mission. After the concert, Michael spent 2 hours with Elena and Sofia backstage. But he wasn't just consoling a grieving mother. He was making phone calls. He was using his connections. He was moving mountains. Michael reached out to the best pediatric cardiac surgeons in the world. He discovered something that the Romanian doctors either didn't know or couldn't access. Sofia's condition, while serious, was actually operable with the right expertise and equipment. The surgery existed. It just didn't exist in Romania. Within 48 hours, Michael had arranged everything. Sofia and Elena were flown to Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, one of the world's leading pediatric cardiac surgery centers. Michael personally covered all medical expenses, all travel costs, and arranged for Ioana to come along as support. The surgery was scheduled for October 3rd, 1991, just 3 weeks after the concert. But Michael didn't stop there. He visited Sofia in the hospital before her surgery, bringing toys and spending hours comforting both the baby and her terrified mother. You're the bravest mama I've ever met, Michael told Elena as she sat by Sofia's hospital bed the night before the operation. Sofia is going to grow up knowing that her mother never gave up on her. Never. Even when everyone else said it was hopeless, you never gave up. Elena looked at this man, this global superstar who had every reason to forget about them after the cameras stopped rolling. But he was here. He was really here. Why are you doing this? Elena asked. You don't know us. We're nobody. Michael shook his head firmly. Every child matters, he said. Every single one. It doesn't matter where they're born or how much money their parents have. Every child deserves a chance at life. That's not charity, Elena. That's justice. The surgery was 8 hours long. 8 hours where Elena paced the hospital corridors, where Ioana held her sister's hand, where nurses brought them tea they couldn't drink and food they couldn't eat. And Michael was there for all of it, waiting, praying, believing. When the surgeon finally emerged from the operating room, his face was tired but smiling. The surgery was successful, he said. Sofia is going to be fine. Elena collapsed. Just fell to her knees right there in the hospital corridor. Ioana caught her, held her, and the two sisters cried together while Michael stood quietly in the corner, his his own eyes wet with tears. Against all odds, against the diagnosis given by Romanian doctors, against everything that should have been possible, Sofia Dumitrescu survived. After 6 weeks of recovery in London, Sofia and Elena returned to Romania with a healthy baby and a future that hadn't existed before Michael Jackson jumped off that stage. But the impact of that night went far beyond one baby's life. The concert footage showing Michael stopping his show, jumping into the crowd, and bringing a sick baby onto the stage aired across Europe and eventually around the world. It became a symbol of what one person with resources and determination could do when they chose compassion over convention. The Romanian government, embarrassed by the international attention on their inadequate medical system, began investing heavily in pediatric cardiac care. Donations poured in from around the world, inspired by the image of Michael Jackson holding that dying baby on stage. Within 5 years, Romania had established its first modern pediatric cardiac surgery unit. The unit was named the Sofia Wing in honor of the baby whose story had started it all. Michael Jackson and Elena Dumitrescu maintained contact for years. Michael called regularly to check on Sofia's health. He sent birthday presents every year. He visited the family whenever he was in Europe. Sofia grew up knowing that Michael Jackson had saved her life, but more importantly, knowing that she mattered to someone even when the world had written her off. In 1995, Elena established the Sofia Foundation in Bucharest, a non-profit organization that helps Romanian families access medical treatment for children with conditions that can't be treated locally. The foundation has helped over 3,000 children get life-saving medical care, coordinating with hospitals across Europe and covering costs that families cannot afford. Michael taught me that one person really can change the world, Elena said in an interview years later. He showed me that compassion isn't just feeling sorry for someone. It's taking action. It's breaking the rules when the rules stand in the way of doing what's right. When Michael Jackson died in 2009, Elena and Sofia, now a healthy 18-year-old preparing to study medicine at university, traveled to Los Angeles for his memorial service. Sofia was one of the speakers, and her words moved everyone who heard them. Michael Jackson saved my life when I was 6 months old, Sofia said, standing at that podium with absolute confidence. But he did more than that. He showed my mother that one person's compassion can change everything. He showed Romania that our children matter. And he showed me that when you have the power to help someone, you have the responsibility to do it. Sofia paused, looking out at the thousands of mourners. I'm studying to become a pediatric cardiologist because of Michael Jackson, she continued. I'm going to spend my life giving other babies the chance he gave me. That's how his legacy continues. Not just through his music, but through every life he touched, and every life those lives go on to touch. Today, there's a plaque at the National Arena in Bucharest, which replaced the old National Stadium, commemorating that September night in 1991. It reads, "Here, Michael Jackson stopped his concert to save a life. September 14th, 1991. In memory of the moment when music became medicine." Every major artist who performs at that venue is told the story of Michael and Sofia. Many of them have incorporated similar moments of audience connection into their own shows, hoping to create their own magical moments of compassion. Dr. Sofia Dumitrescu is now 33 years old and works as a pediatric cardiac surgeon at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, the same hospital where Michael arranged for her life-saving surgery all those years ago. She performs the same operation that saved her life on dozens of children every year, many of them from Eastern Europe and other regions with limited medical resources. Every time I operate on a baby's heart, Dr. Dumitrescu says to the young medical students she mentors, I think about Michael Jackson holding me on that stage in Bucharest. He saw a dying baby in a crowd of 70,000 people, and he didn't look away. He didn't say that's not my problem. He didn't think about the inconvenience or the cost or the protocol. He just acted. She pauses, her hands steady as she reviews surgical notes. He broke every rule, jumped off the stage, and promised my mother that I would live. He kept that promise. Now it's my turn to keep his legacy alive by making sure other babies get the same chance I got. The story of Michael Jackson and Sofia Dumitrescu reminds us that sometimes the most important thing we can do is break the rules when the rules stand in the way of saving a life. Michael had every reason to stay on that stage that night. He had a show to finish. He had a television broadcast to honor. He had security protocols to follow. He had 70,000 other fans who had paid to see him perform. He had every excuse to point at security and let them handle it. But he saw a mother crying while holding a dying baby, and nothing else mattered. Not the show, not the schedule, not the protocol, not the career, not the image. Just the knowledge that he had the power to help, and therefore the responsibility to act. That's the lesson Michael Jackson taught us that night in Bucharest. That's what he taught Sofia, who now saves other children's lives. That's what he taught Elena, who started a foundation that has helped thousands. That's what he taught Romania, which built an entire hospital wing because of one baby's story. Michael Jackson stopped his concert that night in Bucharest. But really, he started something much bigger. He started a wave of compassion that is still spreading today, 30 years later, through every child that the Sofia Foundation helps, through every baby that Dr. Dumitrescu saves, through every person who hears this story and decides to take action when they see someone in need. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is jump off our own stages, whatever those stages might be, and walk directly toward someone in pain. To look them in the eyes and say, I see you. You matter. I'm going to help you. Not tomorrow. Not when it's convenient. Right now. That's what Michael Jackson did on September 14th, 1991. And because he did, Dr. Sofia Dumitrescu is alive today, saving other children's lives, continuing the chain of compassion that started when one man refused to look away from suffering. Michael jumped off his stage that night. The question is, when will you jump off yours? If this story moved you, if it changed something inside you, then subscribe to this channel right now and hit that notification bell. Because these are the stories that matter. These are the stories that remind us what it means to be human. Share this video with someone who needs to believe in miracles today. Someone who needs to know that one person really can change everything. And here's my challenge to you. Leave a comment below and tell us about the biggest act of compassion you've ever witnessed. What happened when someone broke all the rules to help another person? What moment in your life proved that humanity is still worth believing in? Michael Jackson taught us that fame means nothing if you don't use it to help others. That success is hollow if it doesn't lift up the people around you. That the most important thing you can ever do is stop what you're doing and pay attention to someone who needs you. So I'm asking you, what will you stop for? Who will you see? When will you jump off your stage? Michael Jackson stopped that night. He jumped. He saved a life. And that life is now saving others. The chain continues. The legacy grows. The compassion spreads. All because one man refused to look away.